Okay, so welcome to the Scottsdale Big Book Study, where we will study the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Today's date is the 19th of October 2024. My name is Carol, and I'm a recovered compulsive overeater from Dublin, Ireland. I'll be your host for today's study. Our co-hosts are Sue and Nancy P. If you have any questions during the meeting, please contact either myself or the co-host by private message in the chat function. The chat function will be disabled until 5 minutes before the questions and answers section. Please note that the speaker, Harlan G, will be recorded for the duration of the study. However, the questions and answers session which follows will not be recorded. We ask if you can please make sure to keep your microphone on mute at all times during today's study. And also, please turn off your video if you're exercising, eating, or if you need to step away from your screen for any reason. During the session meetings, we will post the Seven Tradition link. This money goes towards the cost of our super account, the cost of uploading our recordings, and we'll also send contributions to our Intergroup Arizona Serenity in the Desert Intergroup and World Service Organization. We'll post a link to the previous week's recordings. These are available by clicking on the link that will be posted in the chat function. I am now very gratefully turn you over to Harlan G.
Thank you very much, Carol. Thank you for your service this morning. I'm so glad to be here. It is a glorious morning. I'm in Lincolnshire, Illinois today and visiting my girlfriend here in the Chicagoland area. And it is just absolutely glorious. We have been talking about step 9. And in order for me to do step 9 effectively, I have to be in 10 and 11. And one of the things that is very clear in the Big Book is we begin 10 and 11 immediately after 4 or 5. It says we commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. And I can't really clean up the past without doing effective 10s and 11s. And that's one of the things I want to make sure that we emphasize here as we discuss step 9. And that is, without step 10 to lean on, I cannot really do 9 because I'm too scared, I'm too angry, I'm too emotional. And what happens is with step 10, I am able to fare forth in high hope to do 9. It says on page 77. Now, when we're on page 77, we're going to actually begin with, we don't use this as an excuse. We don't use this as an excuse. But I wanted to double back, as I promised last week that I would, and talk about the sentence at the very, not the very top of the page, but near the top of the page that says, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. It's about the second or third sentence on the page. It's about, I think it's the third sentence or fourth sentence on the page. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. I cannot be of maximum service to God or anyone while I have unmade amends. Now, there may be people I haven't reached yet, but I have to be working on my amends to really be emancipated to the point where I can be of maximum service. 5 and 9 are the great emancipators. And as I'm doing 9, I start to feel the nearness of God. And as I start feeling that nearness of God, I am really more of a utilitarian person for God's purpose. I am much more utilitarian because I feel so much better. I'm not eating. I'm not encumbered by the guilt, the shame, the remorse, all the various things that have trapped me into a life of fear and shame and guilt and remorse. These are the things I want to do. So this is something that is very, very important. And again, before we begin this morning, I want to remind everybody, if you are the sponsor or you are the sponsee, step 9 is a step where I must be in contact with my sponsor. And the reason is I can go about making these amends, and actually, if I'm misguided, I can actually cause more problems than the original harm. I must be in a situation where I am guided by a sponsor. And one of the things, and I think I've told this story a bunch of times, one of the things I've experienced in my life is people walking up to me in the Los Angeles Hilton or a hotel anywhere or a retreat. And they say, I want to make amends to you. And I say, I've never met you before. I don't know you. And they say, well, I used to think you were a jerk. Now I think you're okay. Well, that's probably information they could have kept to themselves. That's probably information that I really didn't need to know. And that's really sometimes we cause more harm. So it's very important that we check with a sponsor before we go out making amends and know what the heck you're making an amends for. What did you do to harm this person? I must get calls 50, 100 times a year from people who cannot remember what they did to harm somebody, but they want to go make amends to them. What they're really saying is, I'd like to see this person again. I wish I still had a relationship with this person. So I'm going to go make amends because we haven't been friends for a number of years. Not being friends with someone for a number of years is not necessarily any reason to make amends to them. If the relationship just sort of drifted away, that is that is the natural course of life. Many, many times that happens in relationships. So that is nothing that we would actually go and make amends for. So know, if you're the sponsor, what is this person actually making an amends for? And if you're the sponsee, you have to be guided by the sponsor in these things, or you can actually go out there and cause more harm than the original hurt had happened. Okay, page 77. We don't use this as an excuse. We don't use what as an excuse. We don't use the idea of approaching an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce that we have gone religious. In other words, you don't have to go up to somebody and say, hey, I've got this spiritual program. Now I want to go make amends to you. You don't have to do that. It depends who you're making the amends to. Use your common sense. Is this someone who needs to hear that? Is this someone who doesn't need to hear that? Sometimes you have to just use your own common sense. We don't use this as an excuse for shying away from the subject of God when it will serve any good purpose. We are willing to announce our convictions with tact and common sense. So tact and common sense means we're here to clean up our past. You can mention God, you can mention OA, or you cannot mention them. You do not have to disclose that to somebody who you feel is not going to understand it, not going to be in all sympathetic with it, or what have you. You can tell them or not tell them. The choice is yours. The most important thing is that you're there to right the wrong of the past. We don't apologize to the Constitution. We amend the Constitution, and that means we change it. To amend means to change, to repair, to change, to alter. So if we're there, we're not only there to pay them the money back, or we're there to right the wrong, we're also going to have to change our behavior. Very, very important. We don't just apologize and then keep doing the same thing. Very important. Okay. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. This is assuming you are having a problem with this person, that you dislike them in some way. It may be that he has done us more harm than we have done him. And though we may have acquired a better attitude toward him, we are still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It is harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial. Now, last week, beneficial to us. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. You don't go in there with your guns blazing about what this person did to you and how this person harmed you or this person insulted you, what have you. You go in there and you make sure that what you're doing is you're making an amends and you're not there to settle a score. Very, very important that you not be there to settle a score. You're not there to get even with him or her. You're there to make amends. The agenda is, I'm here to make amends. Now, that's very important because a lot of times we're looking for something that's just not right. And that is, I want you, the person, to admit that you did all these things to me. That may happen, that may not happen. Whether it happens or not is not under our control. And whether that happens or not doesn't matter. Remember, we are not in the results business. God is in the results business. We are not in the results business. I'm not there to elicit a certain response from an individual. I am there to clean up my side of the street. Very important that we remember what the agenda is for our visit. It is not for him or her to admit something. It is for me to make amends. And I told you the story last week of the endodontist that I had to go make amends to. You'd missed the story, you weren't here last week, you may want to go back and listen to last week's podcast. I told the story of somebody who insulted me tremendously, treated me like dirt. I owed this person money. I ended up paying his daughter back because he had passed away. I ended up paying the money back to his daughter. And it was one of the best things I ever did because I felt for years I was not going to pay this person back this money. But when I did, it was cathartic. It was just wonderful, very, very wonderful that I was able to do that. Bottom of 77. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Very important. We're not there to criticize. We're not there to argue. We're not there to fault find. Simply tell him that we will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. We are there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so. Never telling him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. So if he's done you harm, maybe more than you did him, maybe she did you more harm than you did her. I don't know. I wasn't there. You were. But you remember too, we're not there to find fault with them. We are there to sweep off our side of the street. Very, very important that we never lose sight of why we are going there. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's very important that we not lose sight of that. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the result. So temper your resentments. Remember, you've already done step 4. You've already worked on these resentments, and always ask yourself this question. If I am there to settle a score with anybody, I'm going to eat again because this is the path to the food. Is this the hill I want to die on? Is this the hill I want to be my Waterloo? Is this the end for me? How important is it to settle a score? Not very, when you consider the fact that you are risking eating. You are risking your recovery, something that you wanted your whole life. You're on step 9. You're on step 10. You're on step 11. You're going to be sponsoring. You're going to be doing the things that are so vital to anyone's recovery. Do we want to quit 5 minutes before the miracle because we want to stand on principle? We want to stand on the fact that you did me more harm than I did you? And you know what? I'll tell you something else that's very important for me to remember. There are 3 sides to every story. There's your side, there's my side, and then there's what really happened. So I may see as clear as a bell that you did this, this, and this, or didn't do that, that, and that. And you have a side of the story too. And your side of the story doesn't need to be discussed here. Your side of the story doesn't need to come up here. The only one thing that is important for me to do is make my amends to you, That is why we're here. Let's continue. Top of 78. In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the man we are calling upon admits his own fault, so feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. Occasionally, they will offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We have made our demonstration, done our part. It is water over the dam. Now, I'm going to say something to you that's not in the big book, but I'm going to say it because I believe it, as well as I believe that today is Saturday. Love and respect are Siamese twins that cannot be separated. Love and respect are Siamese twins that cannot be separated. If I don't respect you, it's very hard for me to love you. If I love you and I don't respect you, I probably won't really love you for very long. If I respect you and I respect what you're doing, and I see the guts and courage of your conviction to recover, I'm going to get behind that. Not because of some cerebral reasoning, but because of something that comes from the heart. It's something inbred in us to respect the striving, to respect somebody who's trying to improve their life. I had almost no amends that didn't center around money. My amends were money. We're going to be talking about that in the next paragraph. But when people saw that I was trying to get my shattered life back in a good direction, many of them said, I don't want your money. You just keep doing what you're doing. I love what you're doing. I love how hard you're trying. You don't worry about owing me money. You go out and you just keep doing it. Now, don't count on that. There were other people that held their hand out and say, I respect what you're doing. Where's my money? And that's okay. That's their right. But love and respect cannot be separated. And when you see somebody doing everything they can do to make a better life for themselves, there is something inborn in the human heart that says, I love this person. I love this person. I love what this person is doing. And it brings people together. Be that example. You remember what Francis of Assisi said? He said, preach the gospel, and only if you must, use words. You going out to these people to make amends, paying the money back, apologizing for the wrong, whatever it is you did, people are going to take note of what you're doing. People are going to notice, and some of them may mention it to somebody, and some of them may not. But you never know. Any idiot can count the seeds in an apple, but only God can count the apples in a seed. And you, by making these amends, you, by going around and righting these wrongs, which most people don't do, you are planting seeds with people that will spring and sprout into apples. Any idiot can count the seeds in an apple, but only God can count the apples in a seed. You're doing God's work by making amends. And by making these amends, you are completing a 3-pronged cycle. In the steps, we get right with God. We get right with ourselves and right with our fellow human beings. This is very, very important stuff. You are a little soldier of God when you go out there to make these amends, something most people will never do. Never. Let's continue, because I owed a lot of money and I want to get to this next paragraph. Most alcoholics, not most people, most alcoholics owe money. We do not dodge our creditors, telling them what we are trying to do. We made no bones about our drinking. They usually know about it anyway. Sorry. They usually know about it anyway, whether we think so or not. Nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory it may cause financial harm. Approached in this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us, arranging the best deal we can. Let these people know we are sorry. Our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we are liable to drink if we are afraid to face them. And when I'm afraid to face them, I have step 10. And step 10 will allow me to continue. This is very, very important stuff. You know, again, in keeping with love and respect being inseparable, people saw what I was doing. Many of them said, no, I don't want your money. Most of them said they did. Some said they didn't. But you are going to respect yourself. And one of the things that I know about this disease, and this is not something that you read in the big book, this is not something that you hear in a lot of meetings. This is a disease of self-loathing. This is a disease of fear. It's a disease of an imprisonment. We become almost agoraphobic. We're afraid of people. We're afraid of ourselves. We're afraid of everything because we have let ourselves down so much. And when I paid that money back, I settled up with the endodontist, and I settled up with different good friends, and I settled up with an insurance agent, and I settled up with another person over here that I owed money to, or a person there that I owed money to. When I do these self-esteemable activities, and I am not compulsively overeating in secret, and I am not doing things that imprison me, and I'm doing things I'm proud of that make me feel good, what happens at that point for me is when I hate myself less, I love God and my fellow human being more. It's just sort of like a teeter-totter. Remember when you were kids and you went on the seesaw or the teeter-totter? In some areas, it's called the seesaw, and in some areas, it's called a teeter-totter. We called it both in Chicago. But when I take a look at that teeter-totter, the more self-hatred I pile on my side over here, the less I am able to really enjoy the teeter-totter. And the less self-loathing I have, the more love I have on the other side. And the more love I have on the other side, what it brings to me is it brings to me a closer relationship with the two relationships of my life that are permanent. There are only two relationships in a human life that are permanent. The first one is with self. You are the only person that you will be with every moment of every day of your entire life. You may think your spouse is going to be with you all the time. That happens sometimes and sometimes not. You don't know what tomorrow brings. You don't know what tomorrow brings. I have a friend who lives here in Chicago. Her husband, unfortunately, diagnosed with cancer less than 30 days ago. Less than 30 days ago, he received his first diagnosis. He passed away yesterday. It's an unfortunate reality, but the reason that I bring it up is we think sometimes we know how a script is going to go. We think sometimes we know how a life is going to go. And then lo and behold, surprise, 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 it doesn't go that way. The only other permanent relationship you will ever have is with God. Whether you believe in God or you don't believe in God, whether you believe in a religious deity or you do not believe in a religious deity, your relationship with that power, whether you call it this, whether you call it that, whether you're an atheist, whether you're an agnostic, whether you're a believer, you have a relationship with the world. Let's take the word God out of it, maybe. Let's take the word God out. And I wish I would have thought of that about 20 seconds ago. Let's take the word God out of that, what I just said. You have a relationship with the world. And whatever, in my case, it's God. In some cases, not. But I have that relationship. Those are the only two permanent relationships. It gives me great joy to say to you today, I walk the streets emancipated. If you remember what I said, 5 and 9 are the great emancipators. They free me up. I walk the streets able to look the world in the eye. I didn't lie to you. I don't owe you money. I didn't take anything from you. I've done a lot of bad things with money over the years. I never kissed anybody's wife. I never kissed anybody's girlfriend. I never took whatever liberties with people. No, I never did that. No. I never did that. But what I did do was I wrote a lot of bad checks. What I did do was I didn't always pay my bills. What I did do was I shirked my responsibility in paying bills. I've had my car repossessed twice. I've been evicted from my apartment, different things with money. Well, when you're not working very hard and your income is not good and you're spending whatever you have on food, there's not a lot of money left for things like rent, auto insurance, auto repairs, medical care, dental care. So I let myself go. In paying this money back, it took a few years because I didn't have the money that I took. But what I did was I had payments with people, and I knocked it down and I knocked it down. And then I realized at one point, I was even with the house. I hated myself less. I loved God more. I wanted to be alive. My whole life was spent disdaining the one life I had. My whole life was spent wishing I was dead and trying to eat myself into a coma so that I could go painlessly. I wasn't conscious of that, but that's what I was doing. And I am a compulsive overeater, and that's why I ate. But I wanted to be dead. I saw no point. I wasn't working on my career. I wasn't dating girls. I wasn't having passionate sex and romance and all the things that my friends were having. I was stuck burying my mom and burying my dad, and the world was just passing me by. And it felt very much like the world had a book of instructions. You hear this at meetings all the time. The world had its book of instructions, and I was not given a copy. And one day, years later, I realized I have the book of instructions, and the name of the book is Alcoholics Anonymous. And if I have the book Alcoholics Anonymous, I have all the instructions I could ever want or need. And through this book, I have a life today that is worth living. I'm so lucky to be alive. I'm so lucky I didn't get my dream. I'm so lucky that God had the final word and it was good. Let's continue. Bottom of 78. Perhaps we have committed a criminal offense which might land us in jail if it were known to the authorities. We may be short in our accounts and unable to make good. We have already admitted this in confidence to another person, step 5, but we are sure we would be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. And it says, maybe it's only a petty offense, such as padding the expense account. Most of us have done that sort of thing. Maybe we are divorced and have remarried, but haven't kept up the alimony to number one. She's indignant about it and has a warrant out for our arrest. That's a common form of trouble too. Although these reparations take innumerable forms, there are some great some general principles which we find guiding, reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any length to find a spiritual experience. We ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. We may lose our position or reputation or face jail, but we are willing. We have to be. We must not shrink at anything. Do you remember the story of Dr. Bob? Dr. Bob was AA's co-founder. Now, Dr. Bob was not recognized as AA's co-founder right away. There was no co-founder for the first 3 years or 3 years. And then about 1938, Dr. Bob started to be recognized as the co-founder. That title could have easily been given Hank Parkhurst, could have been given Fitz Mayo. I am of the opinion it could have been given to Dr. William Silkworth, because Silkworth gives us so much of the information that makes the program work. He gives us the knowledge of the problem, and Dr. Jung gives us the knowledge of the solution. But anyway, Dr. Bob was very reluctant to make amends. He did everything right, but he would not make amends. And in his not doing amends, he actually drank again. And that's what happened, and as we're described. So the bottom line is, Dr. Bob was afraid if he went around Akron making amends to people, that they would find out that he was an alcoholic. Now, here's the punchline to this. The only person in Akron that did not know that Dr. Bob was an alcoholic was Dr. Bob. Everybody else who knew Dr. Bob, everybody else who had any contact with Dr. Bob, was not in any way, shape, or form doubting the fact that he indeed was an alcoholic. And in not doing these amends, he ended up drinking again. Now, do you remember we have discussed here in this forum, we have discussed the 4 impediments to God. And we have discussed them as an impediment being something that slows or stops progress, okay? It slows or stops progress. Now, what is the last of the impediments? The first one is a resentment you will not let go of. The second one is a secret you will not tell. The next one is a harmful thrill that you will not stop. And the last one is a restitution that you will not make. What is a restitution? It's an amends. And if there are amends that you are not going to make, you are going to eat again. It's that simple. Don't ever think you're going to beat the game. You're not going to. You're not going to beat it. If you deliberately won't make an amends, you're going to eat again. So it was posed to us on page 59 of the big book. It says, if you want what we have and you're willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. Do you want what we have? I hope so. What is it we have? We have people that are compulsive overeaters who are not eating compulsively, and they are happy in their release because of a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. We don't have just a bunch of people not compulsively overeating. They have that at Dunkin' Donuts. I bet at some Dunkin' Donuts somewhere right now, there are people who are having a cup of coffee and they are splitting a donut, and each one is having half a donut, and probably neither one will finish their half of a donut. Now, I'd like to test power weapons on these people, because how do you eat half a donut and call yourself a human being? I don't know. I could eat a truckload of donuts. Maybe then that would make sense to me, or half a battleship full of donuts, or half a railroad car full of donuts. That would make sense to me, but not half a donut. And I have friends of mine, you've heard me talk about this many, many times. When we were kids, their dad or their mom would come out, we were playing, and there'd be siblings there, and they would split a sandwich in half. And they would give one half of the sandwich to one sibling and one half of the sandwich to the other sibling, and neither one would finish their half. Now, these people should be thrown into a pit. No, I'm kidding. But the bottom line is that is not me. I'm going to eat my sandwich and yours and anybody else's who's not nailed down. But if I want this recovery, I'm not going to beat this game. I have to go out and make amends. I have to go out and make amends no matter what it might cost me. I must risk jail. I must risk whatever is in front of me, shame and guilt and ridicule, because shame and guilt and ridicule and all those horrible things were mine in the food. I lived in shame. I lived in ridicule. I lived in mockery. I was an object of ridicule. And now I have to risk more ridicule for this. I'm out. Did you forget step 2? Did you forget that you now have a higher power behind you? Did you forget that doing the right thing means that when you walk to God, he runs to you? Maybe you don't believe in God. Nature, higher power, whatever it is you do believe in is okay here. You are welcome here. But miracles happen when I walk to God. Miracles happen when I do the right thing. And when I come clean with the world, yes, I wrote you a bad check, and I knew that check was toilet paper the day I wrote it. I knew that check was worthless. I knew that check was garbage when I gave it to you. Now I have to risk it. Maybe you've done something very serious. Now, short of first-degree murder, I've heard it all. I'll tell you one of the most egregious things I've ever heard in my life. I'm a dog lover. I'm not a big cat person because I don't like the way it makes your house smell, to be honest with you. Not a big cat person. If you're a cat person, that's okay. I'm still going to love you, and that's okay. I think pets are great. But I'm really a dog person. So this kind of hit me right between the eyes. I was talking to a man years ago. He's not around anymore. He deliberately let his girlfriend's dog run out and get killed by a car because he was mad at her. I thought to myself, I didn't say anything. I thought, oh my God, oh my Lord, that is something. I mean, it just, I'm like, I missed a beat of my heart. Does that make sense? My heart just sort of went in another direction or something. I don't know how to describe it. Not really. I mean, my heart didn't really, but emotionally, I was like distraught. I mean, and now I've got to keep my equilibrium because I'm supposed to be objective here. I'm supposed to be helpful here. I'm not supposed to be judging anyone here. But I said to myself, well, now there's one I have not heard before. Wow. But short of first-degree murder, I've heard it all. Now, I told that guy, you've got to go back and make amends to this person for what you did. You've got to go. And buying her a dog is not what I'm talking about. She may be in a position where she doesn't want a dog right now. She may be in a position where she can't have a dog right now. You don't know. You've got to go back and own up for what you did. And you've got to face her and say, I did this. I'm very, very sorry that I did this. How do I make it right? And whatever it is she tells you, that's what you have to do. But there comes a point where we have to get our pride out of the way, get our ego out of the way, get our fear out of the way, step 10, get our anger out of the way at being in this position, step 10, get ourselves right with God and say, I'm going to go and own this, because if you don't own it, it will own you. And it has been driving you into the food. And it has been keeping you in shame and locked in remorse and locked in desperate situations for longer than you can imagine. Can you ask yourself this question? Do you want to recover or not? Because if you don't make these amends, you're not going to recover. Now, you don't have the right to involve anyone else. You don't have the right to make an amends when it will cause further harm. Remember, I told you the story last week of Ernie Gehrig. If you missed the story of Ernie Gehrig, why there's the clause, except when to do so would injure them or others, and you are not one of others. You are not one of others. Go back and listen to last week's podcast, because that's some good information on Ernie Gehrig, why there are certain amends we don't make, except when to do so would injure them or others. But you, the perpetrator of the wrong, are not one of those others. Very, very important. If you want what we have, and you are willing to go to any length to get it, then, and only then, are you ready to take certain steps. Very important that you be ready. Okay, let's continue. We're on page 79. Usually, however, other people are involved. Therefore, we are not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. A man we know had remarried because of resentment and drinking. He had not paid alimony to his first wife. She was furious. She went to court and got an order for his arrest. He had commenced our way of life, had secured a position, and was getting his head above water. It would have been impressive heroics if he had walked up to the judge and said, "Here I am." We thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary, but if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for either family. We suggested he write his first wife, admitting his faults and asking forgiveness. He did, and also sent a small amount of money. That small amount of money means the difference. Send something. Do something. Don't avert these amends because you can't pay the whole amount at one time. You've got to work it down. If you were smart enough to steal it, you're smart enough to pay it back. If you were smart enough to do the harm, you're smart enough to pay it back. I paid back tens of thousands of dollars. I paid back tens of thousands of dollars. I didn't pay everybody in one lump sum. I paid it slowly over time, depending on how much I owed them, slowly over time. And when it was done, I felt euphoria, freedom, like I had never felt it before. Persistence beats passion. Be persistent. If you said you're going to send them $25 a month, send the $25 a month. If you said you're going to send them $50 a month, send the $50 a month. People will respect it. They will respect it. Do something. Don't just avert this. That's why we have a 10th step. That's why we have sponsors. You can run, but the food will find you. You can run, but your bulimia will find you. You can run, but your anorexia will find you. And when it finds you, it will do unspeakable things to you. You either want to recover or you don't. And if you want to recover, you're going to have to do some things you'd rather not do. And one of the things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to pay back the money that you took from these people. bottom of 79. We thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary, but if he were in jail, oh wait, I did that already. Sorry about that. He sent a small amount of money. He told her what he would try to do in the future. He said he was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. Of course, she did not, and the whole situation has long since been adjusted. Send what you can. Send what you can. Do what you can. Own your part. Take action. Very, very important. I'm at the top of 80. Before taking drastic action, which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. If we have obtained permission, have consulted with others, asked God to help, and the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink. Now, I'm going to tell you a story. I've sponsored a lot of people in this 45 years of being in OA. And one of the people that I sponsored was a doctor. He was a cardiologist in a southern state. And he was going along and they were doing well, or he was doing well. And he had a couple of friends that were also cardiologists. He had known them. And he decided he was going to join with two of them in a practice. They were going to start their practice, and they went along, and one of the wives was running the practice. She was the secretary, she was the treasurer, she was sort of the girl Friday of the practice, if you will. And they started having kids. Well, she couldn't be there. So they hired an outside service to run the practice for them, the medical practice. And they start making money like there's no tomorrow. All of a sudden, on the same patient load, they're making more money than they've ever made before. What is the difference? What's going on? Well, they didn't look a gift horse too close in the mouth. And by and by, several years goes by. And the doctor that I knew that was in OA, he discovered they were not exactly playing according to Hoyle with Medicare and Medicaid and the welfare system of that state. There were some reimbursements there that were not exactly kosher. And he didn't like it. And he said to his other two partners, this is not exactly what I signed up for. Let's get rid of these people and stop this shenanigan. And they said, you shut your mouth. It's 2 against 1. Don't you say anything. This is legal. This is okay. We're fine. We're making money. We're taking care of our families. You shut the front door. You shut the front door, or you will be very sorry that you did. He had to leave the practice because they bought him out. He could not go to the state because he would be implicating other people. We don't have the right to implicate anyone else in our situation. We don't have the right to jeopardize someone else without their consent. And of course, they wouldn't give it. So he left the practice. He's making a fraction of what he used to make. And he's happier. I haven't heard from him in a few years. I haven't heard from him in several years. He sort of dropped off the earth. I hope he's still in recovery. I haven't heard from him. I haven't heard him at all. But there comes a point where we are going to have to make a decision. And it's not going to be a pleasant one in some cases. We're going to have to put our money where our mouth is. And we're going to have to go out there and do the things that we need to do to recover. Remember, it was agreed upon at the beginning that you are willing to go to any length to recover. Are you? If so, you're going to need to prove it. If you're not going to recover. You shortcut these things. And the food will find you. the drugs, the liquor, whatever, the gambling, whatever, it will find you. It will prey on your guilt and prey on your fear. And eventually you will succumb to it. How do I know this? I'm living proof of it. I'm living proof. Let's go to page 80. This brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, giving him no receipt for it. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as a basis for discrediting the man. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. You remember the movie It's a Wonderful Life? This is a little vignette right out of, remember when the uncle gives the money to Potter and Potter doesn't give him a receipt and he's trying to prove that he gave the money and he can't prove it. Potter sends the police over to the house and blah, blah, blah. This is a very similar kind of incident right here. He felt he had done the wrong. He felt he had done a wrong he could not possibly make right. Sometimes we feel our wrong is so horrible, we can't possibly make it right. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can make it right. Take action when you can to make it right. Not now if you're on step 1, not now if you're just in your 4th step, but when you get to this step, you get the guidance of a sponsor and you take action. Either you act on it or it will act on you. If he opened the old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. What right had he to involve those dependent upon him? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? After consulting his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion that it was better to take those risks than to stand before his creator guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again, and all would be lost anyhow. So if you don't make it right, you're going to eat again. That's not what you want. That's not what you want. You're going to curse yourself. Make it right. Take that action. And what do we have to do? We have to trust God. We have to hold God's hand. We have to know in our mind that God is with us in all of the things we do. And these are things where I take God with me by doing an effective step 10 and step 11. Step 10 being the critical one here for sure. Where am I here? He attended church. He saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands or he would soon start drinking again and all would be lost anyhow. He attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. His action met widespread approval, and today he is one of the most trusted citizens of his town. This all happened years ago. Do the right thing. When you do the right thing, miracles will happen. Miracles will happen. Trust God. Don't trust your fear. Don't trust your finite self. Trust God. That's all that's necessary here. God will see you through. Bottom of page 80. The chances are that we have domestic troubles. I never had domestic issues like this, so I may not be the best person to speak on this. I'll just do the best I can. I've never cheated on my wife. My wife did cheat on me, but I did not ever cheat on anyone. If I was dating someone, I was completely monogamous. If I even thought about another woman, I don't think that even happened. I don't think that happened. But the bottom of 80, the chances are that we have domestic troubles. Perhaps we are mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. I knew I'd get it out eventually. We doubt if in this respect, alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. But drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. After a few years, after a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. How could she be anything else? The husband begins to feel lonely, sorry for himself. He commences to look around in the nightclubs or their equivalent for something besides liquor. Perhaps he is having a secret and exciting affair with the girl who understands. In fairness, we must say that she may understand, but what are we going to do about a thing like that? A man so involved often feels very remorseful at times, especially if he is married to a loyal and courageous girl who has literally gone through hell for him. I, again, may not be the best person to speak on this because this is not my life. This is not my life. But what I can tell you is there comes a point where we have to make an amends. And if the person that we've cheated on does not really know what happened, we do not have the right to go dumping on that person. We don't have the right to hurt the person we love with information they shouldn't have. What we have the responsibility to do is to knock off the behavior. Stop it, knock it off. You want to make amends, you got to remember that there is a change in our behavior that must occur. And that is we stop cheating. What did I say many times when we were in step one and we were doing the doctor's opinion? I said, put down the food. You got to put down the food. If you're cheating on somebody romantically and you're mixed up with somebody when you are in a monogamous relationship, a marriage, a monogamous dating situation, you got to knock it off. If you want to recover, you got to knock it off. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to judge what you do and where you go. I'm not here for that. I don't care. We are not the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. Didn't we read those words in step 4? But if you want to go out there and date and carouse around, at least be honest enough to say, this is what I want to do. Let's amiably end our relationship or end our marriage. Is that what you want to do, especially if there's kids involved? Really? That's what you want to do to children that you brought into the world? Really? Gosh, I don't know. I don't think it's worth it. I really don't. Maybe I'm wrong. As I say, my life experience does not reflect this. But at some point, you have to own this and knock it off. And the way to make the amends, if the person knows about it, you tell them, this is what I did. If they don't know about it, you don't dump that on them. We're going to get to that next week in the next paragraph. But these are things to ponder. These are things to know. If I don't make amends, deliberately so, for things I know damn well I did, I am going to eat again, and with me to eat is to die. Is this the hill you want to die on? Is this the end of the line for you? Because eventually it's going to catch up with you. Eventually it's going to catch up with you. You're not going to be able to outrun you. You're not going to be able to outrun you. And so what we have to remember is this. I have looked at page 59 and I have sworn to go to any length to recover. That's what I have to do. And if I'm willing to go to any length to recover, that means I am going to have to make these amends no matter what. Let me just put this down in my calendar. Okay, I'm going to add this all day. Okay. Now, we're going to transition to question